All right, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation from DBA Fundamentals. This week, we're talking hybrid disaster recovery with SQL Server 2022 with Armando Lacerda. Today is, as it shows on the screen, June 27th, 2023. In the top right-hand corner of the screen, we show the three leaders of the DBA Fundamentals group, Steve Cantrell, Shane O'Neill, and myself, Kevin Wilkie. If for any reason you need to get hold of us, the easiest way is to get hold of us via our Twitter handles. That seems to be the easiest way that everybody can get hold of us for whatever reason and interact with us as needed. Below that, you see our socials. Easiest way to get hold of us, obviously, is Meetup. So you can reach out to us on Meetup, see any of our upcoming presentations, links back to some of our past presentations over the last year or so. I've seen them all there. But one of my favorite websites of period is the one right below that. The one for this website, for our group, is dbafund.org. It's an easy way to find all of us there as well. There you'll actually find our upcoming presentations, all of our past presentations. If you want to get hold of us for any reason, if, for example, if you would like to present on there, that's one of the easiest ways. You can just send it over to us. We'll look through it and reach back out to you to talk about how we can get you on. Fun things like that. Then below that is our version of YouTube, dbafuntube.com, where you can actually view all of our presentations. While you're on there, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you can be notified whenever any of our presentations go live. Just an easy way so you can watch out, make sure that you get all the goodness as soon as you can. Below that is our Twitter handle, DBA Fun, our Slack channel, and our LinkedIn group, where we post all kinds of different things and can talk about anything pretty much with SQL Server as it is related to a DBA. Also, obviously, any developers are free to join in, and we can talk about all kinds of goodness there as well. Like I said earlier, so all sessions are recorded and usually available within 1 to 2 days. Be sure to check us out on youtube.com, dbafuntube.com, and make sure that you're like and subscribe to it so you can be notified whenever all kinds of goodness comes out. As a note for today, remember to turn off your video and be sure to mute yourself so that we can focus on Armando and watch all the goodness that's coming out from him. And be sure to type any questions you have into our little chat window. And with that, I show Armando's little bio. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to Armando so he can talk about how this presentation will dang near change your life and make things all better for you. So with that, over to Armando.
Here we go. Thank you, Wilkie, for the introduction. And let me get my screen up there. All right. So again, thank you very much for having me with the group. It's I always enjoy this user group interactions and share some of the things that I know about data in the cloud and data on premise. I've been focused a lot on premise stuff. I mean, on the cloud stuff, cloud implementation. But of course, I had my share on the cloud. I mean, on premise. Oh my God, focus on on the cloud. So let me switch here to my slide deck and put it up here. Again, my name is Armando Lacerda. This is the only social media that I keep in terms of professional connection. I do have Facebook and Instagram too, but that's more personal stuff. We are welcome to connect with me there. You're gonna see me riding my motorcycle here in California or some other stupid thing I'm doing somewhere else. But in terms of professional and content, yes.
I can't see your screen. Are you sharing it?
You cannot see my screen.
Nope. Check with the audience, they cannot either.
I do not see I'm on the screen. Okay, let's try that again. I mean, you should be seeing me, right? Could you see me?
I don't see you either.
Even what about now?
Trying to come up. It's just like it's not
Nope.
going out. Nope.
All right, I will log off and log back in.
Okay. We will wait.
Okay, let's
waiting
try
for
that again.
perfect.
Not
Not
from
taking long at all.
here. Let's see. How about now?
Nope. Same blank screen.
That's weird. Okay, let's try this. Why is Teams not working? Can you see my screen now?
There we go.
That is
Yep, I
funny.
see it.
Perfect. All right, so we can see it. That's great. Yay, you got a thumbs up there. Thank you for the feedback, Doug. And yeah, it's showing for you. Now it's not showing for me, but it's fine. If you can see, it's great. Okay, where is my here? All right. So again, my name is Armando Lacerda, as you see there on the screen I'm sharing. And like I was saying before, what's my mouse? Let's see if that works better. There we go. This is my social media connection. Unlike this group that has like 6 or 7 social media options for you, I have only one in terms of professional connection. I would welcome you guys to connect with me on LinkedIn and to keep the conversation going after the session is done. And yeah, I'm a Microsoft MVP and also a Microsoft certified trainer. And because I'm a trainer, if you want to train on Microsoft subjects, you have to get certified first. And I've been doing training for way longer than I care to remember. And I have collected dozens of certifications throughout the year. Most of them focused on the data platform and SQL and everything around SQL, and then cloud when the cloud came along. I've been an MVP on data platform for the past 4 years, and it's an award that Microsoft gives to professionals like us when we are willing to share our knowledge or the things we know about the product, and we blog about this and about our knowledge, and we share the knowledge and do sessions like this. When you guys are here at my place and presenting what you know, you may get noticed and may get nominated and may be awarded with that MVP title, which is pretty cool. It comes with a lot of perks. One of them I'm using today, which is an Azure subscription, so we can demo and test things as you want. All right, so that's a little bit about me. Moving on. There you go. So let's talk about disaster recovery. Going back about 20 years ago, when I first came here I'm originally from Brazil, but when I first came to US back in 2000, 2001, end of 2000, early 2001, I started working for this company down there in Miami, in Florida. And we used to do disaster recovery. It's kind of a mandatory. You gotta do this thing there more than in most places because of the hurricanes. You always have the hurricane season. And I remember the backup strategy, the disaster recovery strategy we used to have there is, have the backup tapes, and, you have the backup system there to mirror the backup to 3 tapes at the same time. So it takes the backup to 3 tapes at the same time. We keep one in the building. We kept another one in a building nearby, like 20 miles away. And we shipped the other tape down to Georgia, down to close to where Wilkie is, right where Wilkie is. And we used to ship there because now hurricanes can be very large, and we want to have a copy of the data, a copy of the backup far away from where the hurricane could hit if it hit down there in Miami. So, and that was the idea, right, of disaster recovery. Send your data someplace else, far away as possible. And if something happens, you build up your hardware, your installation again, you build up your hardware again someplace else, restore your tapes, and off you go. So that's in the prehistorical ages of computing. You used to do like this. The time to recover, right? The time to get the things back up is it was like days. I had a case once down there in Brazil before I moved to US where we spent like 5 days because there was a hardware failure and when you have to wait for a new hardware to get into the country so it could be installed on a server. So these are very old days, and stories like that usually doesn't repeat nowadays anymore because we have better options, right? The better option that we have today, it's usually based on mirroring our data center into another data center. And in here, I want to just make a side note here, is when the line that separates disaster recovery from high availability becomes a little blurred, right? And, it's kind of they sometimes they sound like synonym. When I talk to customers, I'm an independent consultant. So when I talk to customers and I'm talking about this particular subject, I see people nowadays using disaster recovery and high availability as a synonym of each other. Technically, historically, they are not synonyms because disaster recovery usually depends on a strategy of rebuild your system someplace else because you don't want to keep an expensive platform someplace else always up and running and in standby mode, waiting for waiting for the potential failure of your primary site. But with the advantage of the cloud support, right? The cloud offering, both public clouds, large ones like Azure, as small ones, some small cloud providers. I have some customers that use very small cloud providers like colocation places down there in Florida. I live in California, but I have customers down there. So we see cases like this. Let me double check. Can you guys see this little design that's on the screen right now, on my screen? Can you see on yours? A thumbs up there for me would be great, so I know you're there. Perfect. All right, so you can see this. So in this one here, what we have, thank you for the chat message. So in this one here, as you can see, what we have is my own premise, like this would be my South Florida one that I mentioned before. So I have my own premise implementation here with some application depending on a database installation running on a VM. And I can have this infrastructure here in Azure, which is known as a site recovery, recovery VMs, a site recovery. So to run a site, to run the VMs up in the cloud, usually it's the most expensive option you can have. But if you implement this solution in Azure called site recovery, it's not as expensive as it could be, because while your primary site is up, this VM and this SQL Server here, they're getting the delta of the data changes on these installations in here, and they are in standby mode. They're not really running, right? They're just in standby mode. So Microsoft doesn't charge you while you are in standby mode in Azure. Now, if there is a failover into the recovery site, then you get the full bill because then compute comes into place and the whole thing comes alive to support your applications. They were being directed to your on-premise and now they have to go into the cloud. This, by the way, is into the theme of our session today, which is a hybrid disaster recovery implementation, right? You are supporting on-premises into the cloud, so that makes it hybrid. Yeah, one of the things to keep in mind is as long as you do this hybrid element, this hybrid implementation in here, applications, outside applications, they usually don't understand this well. So we need to adopt other services that will do what Microsoft calls traffic management, and there is a service called traffic manager. It's not load balancing because you don't have both of them up at the same time. But if one goes down, people don't need to change their configurations. They're just redirected to some other place. In terms of app connection, that is great. The database side is usually tricky because the configurations that are running here that are being mirrored in here have to change because this VM here is running another virtual network more likely. So sometimes there is some gotcha in there, but it's doable. And this is one of the traditional designs for hybrid disaster recovery in the cloud. And as you can see here on this design, it's SQL Server 2016 can live on that one. It's fine. It supports. It knows how to deal with the deltas coming to blob storage into the VM. So we got some support in there. But every time Microsoft releases a new SQL Server, right, a new version of SQL Server for on-premise in particular, there's always more integration with cloud elements. One thing to keep in mind, to realize when you are looking at this design is the SQL Server itself is oblivious of a copy of the instance anywhere else. So over time, it came up with Microsoft came up with another design that looks close to the first one, right? You see, still have site recovery here. And side note here, in case you wonder, you see this white space in here? I was supposed to be standing here. The way I had it set up before, I would be like the weatherman there pointing to things into the design. But for some reason, the sharing didn't work. So that's why I'm not there. And that's why you see this white space here sometimes. It's just how I had it set up originally. But anyways, we still have the site recovery here. And we are, through site recovery, we are doing things on all the elements on the platform that are basically processing or content management. But on the database itself, as you can see over here, there is under this more updated design more updated design best practice. The idea is not to have the VM running SQL Server being replicated through the regular site recovery infrastructure that we have seen in the previous slides. The idea here is to rely on always on feature we have in SQL Server. We had that feature since I think 2016 or 2014. I can't remember, but way back there. And so it's been around for a while. And the point in here is like, SQL is great to manage data. So it's better to have SQL replicating your data than have a generic service to replicate data that are in hard drives, not specialized in SQL, which is site recovery in this case. To get your data across, especially on a platform where the data changes constantly, right? When you are running a Linux web application, for instance, or running SharePoint in there, SharePoint has its data in SQL. So the actual infrastructure in SharePoint and the web other web applications, they tend not to change so often, right, or so constantly. So the replication between site recovery will more likely not have much data loss, right? You usually get some, but you don't have that much data loss. But we cannot afford, or don't want to have data loss in SQL Server. So if I use SQL Server features to do data replication, in this case through SQL Always On feature, it would be way better. But the problem here is it's not actually a problem. This thing works. There's no problem in here. But the gotcha in here, the little thinking, that little speaking there, is that this guy here is still working as a VM. And VM means I'm doing infrastructure as a service. Let me get my pen here to highlight that. Is the pen up? Yeah. So this one here is still doing infrastructure as a service. And when you do infrastructure as a service, in Microsoft Azure model, usually you're paying premium for that. You're paying a little more. You have more management to do because the whole infrastructure is your responsibility. The best thinking here would be to have this guy here as a platform as a service. And the platform as a service are those SQL Server offerings that don't require VM. Microsoft runs the VM in the back end. I don't see the VM. I don't have to manage the VM. I just have the SQL Server database and the SQL Server instance there available for me. This was not possible before because of an incompatibility in between the data files. The data files in between a regular, sorry for the handwriting there. The data files in between a regular SQL Server running on a VM and a SQL Server on platform as a service, they are not compatible, meaning I cannot back up a database running on a SQL VM and restore on a SQL Server running on as platform as a service. So this design here could only be implemented if I had a VM at the other end, but not if I had a platform as offering, which is usually the cheapest one and more flexible one that I can have up in Azure. But things have changed. We are now on SQL Server 2022. We have new options, more integration, more hybrid integrations with the cloud. So with that one, we also have a particular offering for SQL in the cloud called Managed Instance there on the slide deck, MI. If you're not familiar with SQL Server Managed Instance, this slide here gives you where it sits in terms of offering in Azure. So in the 2 slides ago, we were talking about SQL running on a VM, and it goes in here, right? SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. So the site recovery option was based on using this particular resource. This other one here, this guy here, actually, I think I have a highlight stuff here. I think this one is better. There we go. Oh, come on. Where are you? Here. So this guy here, the Azure SQL database, is the platform as a service I just mentioned. But again, I cannot restore or do high availability always on these things to this one here, right? It's not supported. It has these things built into itself, so we don't have to set up. It has zone redundancy. It replicates its data to other data centers in Azure by itself. But the hybrid option there, on-premise to cloud, not available on that one. In between these two guys, we find SQL Server Managed Instance. So the Managed Instance is really a hybrid from another perspective. The thing about the Managed Instance here is you do have a platform as a service. Let me get to laser point back in. There we go. You do have platform as a service offering, which means you don't have to worry about a VM and patching the VM. So it lowers your management cost, right? Your ownership cost of the feature, operational cost of the feature. And the feature itself, it's a little cheaper, not much, but a little cheaper than the VM or infrastructure as a service. So you have this guy here. And you do have features in here that would be only available on a VM. For instance, if you need SQL Server Agent, if you need SQL Server Agent, you're not going to find SQL Server Agent on Azure SQL Database. It's not there. Cannot have it, right? You just can't. You have to use a native Azure scheduling elements like Azure Functions or playbooks in Azure, and some other automation, Event Grid, if you want to automate stuff on an Azure SQL database, because there is no automation for elements in here, only in the platform, only in Azure. In SQL VM, of course, you do have agent there because it's a VM, is a regular SQL offering. In Managed Instance, you do have most of the things that would have only in the VM, but without the VM, which is great. But before SQL Server 2022, that thing about backing up something on a VM and restoring in Managed Instance was still a trouble, was still some issue there. And to dive deep into that, if you want to research on this later, the thing goes, the issue goes into the data file, right? The data file, the backup data file, and actually the data files that run our, that host our data, they have some version structure elements inside them. And those structures, they are incompatible. They're different in between managed instance, SQL database, and Azure virtual machines. So no, not an option for disaster recovery until hybrid disaster recovery until SQL Server 2022. So with SQL Server 2022, there was an addition to the platform to SQL Server and to manage instance that made the data flow in between these two guys possible. So how does that work? Well, before we get there, let me show you this other slide here because I want to show you what you are signing up for when you go into manage instance. And by the way, I'm going to scroll back a couple of slides here just to give you perspective. When we are talking about a managed instance, in this design here that we were looking at before, and there is this thing here for clarity. So what we are talking about here, in case I'm not that clear here, is not having a SQL VM here, but having a SQL managed instance. And there is something about my pen. Sometimes it does some, some lines in there that I didn't do, but it likes to do it by itself. So let me get this L more like an L here. SQL Server Managed Instance. So instead of a VM, we have SQL Server Managed Instance. This is what we're talking about in terms of this design, right? But when I sign up for SQL Azure SQL Server Managed Instance up in a cloud, what am I getting? So I'm not just getting a virtual machine with a database attached to it. It's actually a very robust infrastructure under the hood. You don't see this. This slide is showing you the internals. Like, look, internal, it's showing you the internals of the elements. You only see the endpoints to it to get connect to it, but you really don't see everything that's under the hood. The features. You have SQL Server agent. You have some things that are similar to a regular on-premise deployment. But what else do we get that I don't see? Well, one of the things I want to highlight is you do have a primary node and you have a secondary node on the same virtual cluster where this has been deployed to. So when you create a SQL managed instance in one of the data centers, in one of the regions that are in Azure, you already have high availability in place for you. So if the primary node goes down, the secondary node will take over, right? Depending on the subscription you have, it can be even in another region, right? If you go business critical, like you cannot afford downtime of the server up in the cloud. The storage, all the data that's being stored in there in the nodes goes into the Azure storage places, which means you have all the SSDs that's available for you. You get the SLA for throughput, which is usually lower than you would have on premise. But if you do that per database, the balancing between database, you can get close performance. If you have a very high demand database in terms of transactions per second, you may get some issues in terms of performance, but it has very good threshold for performance. You can check on the documentation what they have in there. And there is also this, where is it here? You see, it runs on a separated network on a VNet, which means that all the traffic by default is isolated from the public network. People from the public network cannot connect to it. And this is designed to connect to your on-premise network. So it's really hybrid, right? It's designed for that. So we create a site-to-site connection. You may use express routes to have better network performance connection between these things. But the idea is everything that happens in there is private. It is like a 10 dot whatever IP address, right? 10.0.0.0 IP address, or any other private IP address you decide to use. So this whole thing in there, if you want to, you can expose to public connection, which I'm trying to do here for the demo. you can expose to public connection. But even the public connection changes the port. So the thing is really designed to work on for isolated environments and for hybrid scenarios where you have on-premise network connections to the cloud infrastructure creating, which the cloud just becomes a secondary data center that you have a private network in there. Side note in here, this particular slide, some of these slides here, this particular one, I got them from Bob Ward. You know Bob Ward, right? Bob Ward is well known in the community, Microsoft Program Manager for SQL, all things. And Microsoft, he makes available his slide decks on his GitHub repository. So if you just search for Bob Ward, GitHub, and SQL 2022, you're gonna bump into multiple of his slides, and you're gonna find this slide deck there for the hybrid instance and the SQL Server managed instance. People usually ask, "Can I have a copy of your slides?" Yeah, I can send my one, but you can get the original from Bob in the GitHub. So it's up to you. Wilkie, how are you doing about questions? Any questions there?
There was one question, but thankfully I answered it for you about SSIS packages and how they work in the MI. Otherwise, we're good to go.
Okay, thank you for helping me out there. So let's take a look in Azure. Let's been talking for about 30 minutes here. Let's see if my Azure environment is ready there, because managed instance is a bit expensive to keep it running all the time, especially when it's just for demo. So I usually deploy them a couple hours, at least an hour before the demo. So in this case here, yeah, it's still going, still deploying. So I started this thing here 8:26, as you can see over here, right? 8:26 in the morning, my time. It is 9:32, so it's been deploying this for about an hour, which gives you a sense that if you're planning to use this, you have to give yourself some time for the instance to create. All other SQL Server instances, they get created in an instant, like no more than 5 minutes, you have the whole thing there working for you. So what does this take so much longer to get deployed? One of the reasons is this one here just showed you, right? All the infrastructure that's been put in place to support the managed instance. You just see it like a server, it's just a server there, but there is all of this infrastructure there, multiple VMs running behind the scenes, and all the connections to the storages and all the allocations that are being happening up there in the cloud. So we leave this alone. We see if it finishes up before we wrap up the session. But if I want to create one, we can go here. Actually, I rather do from here, SQL, and let me get a little bigger here, right, so you guys can see it better. Let me know if this one is, if this zoom is good enough. So if I go here, manage instance, I should find it here somewhere. Let's do a better one. SQL, there it is. SQL managed instance. So this one is the one that's being deployed. See, still creating there. So let's go and see the process of creating a new one here just quick. And yeah, this is the Microsoft Azure subscription that they give to MVPs for presenting contents like this. So there we are. I have here a resource group that I have already created for that. And here we come up with a name. This is the name that the other one is coming up with. I'm going to put just a placeholder there. I'm not really going to create the second one, just to show you the steps. So that's my region. And usually you want to keep the region close to the other services that are connecting to this. And if you go back in here, it's kind of a subtle detail here, but if you go back in here, right? Let's go back to this guy. Notice that this managed instance here is connected to a VNet, right? It's designed to be connected, and you cannot have it outside the VNet. And if this thing here is connected to a VNet, you more likely want to have it on the same here, on the same VNet where the other guys are. or at least on a VNet that has a peer to the VNet where the services that are consuming this managed instance are, right? So that's how it connects to each other, connecting the dots there for you. Moving on, let's go back there so I don't lose my place in the slides, getting here. And yeah, so that's my managed instance, and there will be a network there for my managed instance in a second. This is just authentication. Now, here is your capacity, right? What's going to be the performance of your managed instance? So you can go general purpose or you can go business critical. The main difference between these two, there will be a slide coming up about this, but the main differences between these two go into storage, right? General purpose can hold more data, but it doesn't perform as fast as business critical, right? So business critical will have better I/O performance than the general purpose. And yeah, you see super fast storage, the underlying elements are different in there. Oops, back in here. So these are one of the differences in there for the service tier. And here is the hardware that will be supporting this, either one of them, right? Which one you decide to use. So we can do general hardware, you can do premium series or premium series with a better ratio in between CPU and memory, more RAM memory per CPU. And here it's your rough, estimated bill if you keep this thing running 24/7 for a month. And a month is 730 hours, right? Like a month with 30 days. So February will be a little cheaper. Months with 31 days a little higher. And down here is your backup strategy, right? Where you see, remember those tapes I used to do there in Florida? I don't have to worry about those tapes anymore because as a platform, as a service, it will do the backup for me. And I just have to configure the backup retention, for how long I want to keep the backup available and, how far in the past I want to be able to restore data in case I need. And here is where I want to keep my data. If this data center was in Miami, like in my case at the beginning of the presentation, here is like keep the tapes only in Miami. This one here is like keep the tapes in Miami and in a nearby city, right? Another zone in the same region. And down here is like the two previous one, plus send this thing to a region in another state, somewhere else. And there is a pairing of geo-replicated regions in there, like if you do East Coast and gets to Texas, if you go West Coast, it gets to North someplace. So there is a list in there that's documented in there. So all of those backup tapes to send things around, all done for me, which is lovely. I like it. What else? I think this is all from here. What my apply? I think my apply is not available there because I didn't change anything. Now I changed. All right, close this. All right, moving on. Networking. Here's a little think about the managed instance. We all know that SQL Server likes to expose port 1433 for connection. And all SQL offerings out there, unless if you change by yourself, they will expose port 1433 for client connections. And inside the VNet, inside the local virtual machine, the private network, virtual network, it will be port 1433 there. But if you publish your VM to the public internet, you see this corner here. If you publish your SQL managed instance to the public internet, it will ask you, right, if you want just Azure services or the whole internet to be able to connect to it. And when you do this, there is no warning here or anything. But when you do this, the actual port, the public port there will not be 1433. It will be a different port. It's 35 something. It will be a different port. which makes it, less guessable for people. But now it's a public information, so hackers may try in there. But it makes it sometimes even difficult to us because we have to remember that the TCP port for the public endpoint is different. All right, so these are some of the gotchas there. Everything else pretty straightforward. And when you have this, as you can see on the design, you pretty much have a small footprint data center running in Azure, supporting just SQL Server managed instance. You have a VNet, you have multiple clusters running on that VNet. Depending on the subscription you do, you may have that replicated in another region. They're communicating, and the backups are being kept, whatever you decide them to be kept. So you do have the entire infrastructure running for you, automated, and you don't have to worry a bit about any of those things, right? And all the high availability elements are there up in the cloud. So the last thing that I'm missing here, and this is still deploying, so I'll go back to this one later. So the last thing I'm missing here is the actual connection from my on-premise, my local SQL Server running on VM, to the cloud, to this installation I just showed you how to create. Here, just a couple of reviews of the elements I just showed you. This is, general purpose. Where's my laser point? General purpose here, running with up to 16 terabytes, costs a little less than the general, than the business critical that would cost a little more. And here on the business critical, you do have a different storage layout for the business critical that will give you more speed, right, to connect to this guy here. You can have read replicas in some other places if you want to. It's an option in there, but it's kind of out of the scope here for the session because we're talking about the hybrid disaster recovery, right? So we're going to see how those two connect together. These are the hardware specs for the CPUs, for the VMs when you do one or the other. Some of the elements in terms of the high availability, you do have multiple gateway and entry points. So if one gateway that's listening to the public internet goes down, you have other backup ones. And actually, they're standing up. They're all available at the same time there. So applications, they get the connection information from these gateways to get to the replica that's available. It's up online, right? Called the primary replica. And in case this one fails, you have your secondary replicas, the secondary nodes, they're all sharing the same storage place. So these are just in standby, right? They're not really sharing any load. SQL Server in terms of clustering is only active standby, right? Not active, it's just active and standby. And you have all our data there on the storage. For the business critical, we do have a live secondary one that can work as a read-only replica that you can direct clients to it, client applications to it. And always on is the infrastructure keeping this ring working within regions, right? This can work in multiple regions. So in case one full region, the complete region goes down, like east to west goes down, the other region picks up with the data being replicated between both regions. All right, so it's it's a lot of things working under the hood, ready for you, tested. You can do this flip over, you can test this, the high availability there. But now we want to get to this. When we have a primary region, and this one here would be my on-premise site, and I want to have managed instance supporting the data tier of my the disaster recovery of my data tier up in the cloud. So everything comes back together, right? And it's the same general design. You still need a traffic manager for the application entry point. But in case you're separating your VNets, managed instance and the web service, they are in distinct VNets. So if the managed instance goes down, or if the applications go down, the applications may switch, but the database doesn't have to switch. Like my on-premise could be using managed instance up in the cloud to do the transaction. So if my on-premise fails, my managed instance up in the cloud is still up and running. And in case that fails, I could switch to someplace else. So there are multiple levels of reliability and support where the database runs. The next slide, that demo is not available because the other thing is still not there. So that particular approach, when we have on-premise SQL over here, right? We get on-premise SQL running in a VM on a regular SQL server and manage instance running up in the cloud. If I want to do that implementation of pushing the data over to the cloud, I can use this feature in managed instance called the link feature for managed instance. And this is what makes hybrid disaster recovery from on-premise to the cloud possible on this platform. One of the elements that make this possible, besides the actual feature, right, the link feature, one of the things that makes it possible is Microsoft started in SQL Server 2022. Microsoft started supporting the versioning of the SQL Server 2022 data files and backups into the managed instance. So we can send real-time data replication, or near real-time, it's never really real-time, right? But you can send sync, right? And we have async and sync, so we can send sync data as it processes here, send it over there. So we can have a pretty much a mirrored copy of everything that's in here on the fly from SQL Server 2022 to managed instance. So managed instance became a version agnostic. You know, the files in there, the data files in there, when the data comes in, it adjusts the data structure to be kept into managed instance. And you can do that on the way up from on-premise to managed instance for the standby one that you're keeping in there, which again, if you compare to site recovery, the very first scenario showed you site recovery doesn't keep the SQL Server there up and running, right? It's just in standby. In this case here, it is up and running and can be used to offload pressure from your main server. So if you want to do reporting, if you want to do analytics, if you want to do applications that will just be read only to get the data from the clouds, applications that are cloud-based and on public internet, or even applications that are running here but don't want to get this server here overloaded, you can get them and start sharing workloads, right? Read-only workloads with the managed instance. This is highly recommended. It usually requires some application changes, but it's highly recommended because you are paying full price on this guy here. You're really paying full price on this guy here, right, on the managed instance. So just to have it standing by there for a rollover, a failover in case my on-premise fails, it will be kind of a too much of an expensive solution. But if you start using it as a always on, remember the always on approach. This looks like it's not always on the implementation, but looks like an always on. If you start using that like read replica of an always on deployment, then the investments start making sense, right? Because you have the full SQL Server there running there for you in the managed instance. So to have this one here, you need to request this feature from Microsoft. And this feature, in order to request this feature, this is the page, the documentation that documents it, right? Documentation that documents it, oh my God. And in here, in the documentation, the first link you see is the link to sign up for the feature. Like if I want to use this, I have to request it from Microsoft. So there is a form in here for you to request the service. And as you do this, there will be more pages besides this one here. But as you do this, oh, that's the feedback. What is the request? Go back one. Manage link user feedback. You must sign up. There we go. Second link. So you get to this form here where you're going to request that feature from Microsoft. So when they deploy managed instance for you, it will have that feature available and the link service available. You can start doing the replication from on-premise to the cloud site where managed instance is working. Let's double check this one here, see if it's up. I'm sorry, guys. So this demo here will fail. It's still deploying. It's taking longer than usual. Over almost an hour and a half already. Yeah, taking longer than usual. Sorry about that. And that's how we implement hybrid disaster recovery. I think the last topic that's missing here that I need to address is, all right, so I had a failover from my on-premise to the cloud. Now I fixed my on-premise. Can I bring my on-premise from a failed site to the as being and restore it as a primary site again? Like, can I get the copy of my data that's here in the cloud back to on-premise and start running my primary node, my primary user database from on-premise? And the answer is yes, you can, right? There is a way to get that migrated back into on-premise. Like I said, there is this data structure in the data files that they're made compatible with each other, so the managed instance can roll that thing back, and you can get the on-premise back to be the primary in case you want to do that. So yeah, so that's how it goes. You have continuous replication from data from on-premise to the cloud, disaster recovery in the cloud using that feature through managed instance. Yeah, deploy and configure. It's easily, but it is time consuming. As you could see here in my demo, right? My managed instance is not there yet. It's been deployed for a while. And when you request that feature from Microsoft, it's going to take a couple of days for them to whitelist your subscription. But once you go through those hops, those hurdles there, you are good to go. And the distributed availability group is what the infrastructure that goes behind the things in there and gets the information crossing over. So in summary, this is what it looks like. It's there just for you to take a look. And from here, I open for questions, and we're done with content. So it's just questions from here to the end of the hour, to the top of the hour.
Awesome. No questions have come in yet.
And this may have turned
please feel free to ping it in your chat, and we'll go through them right away.
Take a look in the chat, you said?
No, I just saying, remind everyone that put your questions in the chat because everything. Oh, speaking of, Brent has a question.
All right.
He asked, have you failed back to on-prem? I haven't heard it. Is it really ready for prime time? I have heard it isn't really ready for prime time.
It works. But again, you have managed instance. That's a different data structure and engine than the one that's running on premise. So rolling back has its specific steps. It's not like you have availability group and you switch one or the other. It doesn't work like that. There is some involving steps, but it works. It takes a little longer than the regular always on, but it works. Yes, I have switched back to on-premise.
Right. Stephen Wheeler asked, is your MI instance deployed from scratch as like ARM templates? As in like ARM
you
templates?
can automate it. You can automate it. When you talk about ARM templates, you're talking about automation, right? You automate the deployment and redeploy exactly the same way it was before in case you lost it somehow. So you can deploy managed instance through either ARM or Bicep. So you can get there. But to the question itself from scratch, well, when I did the portal, it was from scratch, right? If I end my process there in the portal, what is the portal here? If I end my process here in the portal, here, let's go to review and create. Something is missing there, but where is it? There is an option here somewhere where I can get the Azure template right out of here. Don't have to deploy to get an ARM template created out of this. I don't see the option there, perhaps because I'm missing something. But so to the question, yes, you can deploy through ARM templates.
Option. Oh, great. Final question, at least as of right now. Is there downtime to roll back?
If I want to bring it back from Azure, right? The managed instance as back to on-premise. If I run it back there, there is a switch over, so there is a downtime. The downtime, depending on depending on how you implement that downtime, it can be a few seconds, can be a couple minutes. So there is a downtime.
All right. And Gary has the question. This is going to be a loaded question. I'll go ahead and say that one. In MI, the chart says almost 100% full capability. What's missing?
What's missing? So here's the thing. SQL Server is a name. It's a brand name. But I do the math here in my head. More likely you have there, I don't know, perhaps over 100 different possible deployments of the thing, if you consider the options there are in Azure for it. And each one of them, they may have slight changes on the compute capacity, which is more into the VM configuration that's supporting SQL. And some of them, they have changes on the features, like which SQL statements and SQL features I can use from the engine. So some features, for instance, like in-memory tables, the hackathon tables, some SQL offers do have it, some SQL offers don't have it. In terms of managed instance, what you have in there is like, it's not the same engine that runs on premise. It's pretty close. It's the same. The bulk of it's pretty much the same. But if you want to do, for instance, file groups, you can't. If you want to do partitions, you can, but you cannot define specific file groups for those partitions. And there's light changes like this, right? On certain aspects of SQL, when it gets too close to the VM management, they're blocked from you. So we cannot do it there. So that's when, it's not 100%. It's not that 100% is like, this is not like running on a VM and we take the VM from you. This is a same SQL engine with slightly some features either hidden from you or not available from you. That's what they mean by almost 100% full capability.
Yeah, I'll go into a little bit more detail actually, because I actually used to run MIs. So one of the things we found that obviously if you do anything in R or Python, if you have to include DLLs for that, obviously you can't do any of that because there is some file-based parts to it you'd have to add. If you want to, like, for example, add on anything you need to import for there, that obviously won't work because there's no quote unquote file system to work with. We also found you could not call APIs because of some of the things, the way you have to call it requires on a file system. So anything using a file system, you really can't do on MIs. But yeah, for everything else, it's pretty dang close to on-prem.
Yep, there we go. Thank you for reaching that answer. Appreciate it.
I am here for you, brother. All right, it looks as if there are no more questions and we are reaching the top of the hour. So I do want to thank Armando for making all this happen. This has been a great presentation. Thank you for
having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be with the group. I really do.
Oh, my pleasure. And so with that, I want to remind everyone to come out on July 11th, where we're going to be having Nikita Takru talk about what is Azure Arc-enabled data services. So that should be fun to hear all about that goodness. And that is our next presentation. So come on, let's make it happen. So until then, thanks y'all. Have a great week and we'll see y'all next time.
See ya.
Thanks again, Armando.
Thank you very much, Kevin.